Warm greetings to all of you children. Today our class would be based on the explanation part of a very beautiful poem by Charlotte Olsen, A Photograph. Before we start the poem, let us know something about the poet. Charlotte Olsen was a poet, teacher, educational journalist, and editor, and the author of books about walks along the ancient tracks and roads of Britain. Charlotte Olsen was born on 20th May 1924 and in Henley-on-Thames, England, as the daughter of Douglas Horsfall Dixon and Marjorie Brown. She had a huge passion on writing and was greatly influenced by her father, who was a writer too. She secured a BA on literature from Brockenhurst College in London in the year 1953. Poetry had been a favorite occupation since childhood. Her first exuberant poem was written at the age of 8. The appeal of her work is in its honesty, sharp observation, and a kind of compassionate alertness with which she addresses themes like family and childhood, memory and place. The work in her final private collection, A Lifetime of Poetry, is wide-ranging, touching, technically very accomplished, and will last. Among her other books was A Companion Guide to Devon, 1996. Charlotte Olsen died at the age of 94 in September 23, 2018. Children, let us read the poem, A Photograph. The cardboard shows me how it was when the two girl cousins went paddling, each one holding one of my mother's hands, and she, the big girl, some 12 years or so. All three stood still to smile through their hair at the uncle with the camera. A sweet face my mother's, that was before I was born, and see, which appears to have changed less, washed their terribly transient feet. Some 20-30 years later, she would laugh at the snapshot. See Betty and Dolly, she would say, and look how they dressed us for the beach. The sea holiday was her past, mine is her laughter. Both ray with the labored ease of loss. Now she has been dead nearly as many years as that girl lived, and of this circumstance there is nothing to say at all. Its silence silences. Children, let me explain to you stanza-wise. The poem begins thus. The cardboard shows me how it was when the two girl cousins went paddling, each one holding one of my mother's hands, and she, the big girl, some 12 years or so. The cardboard here refers to the thick, stiff photo paper used in the pre-digital photography era to develop prints and store memories. It is interesting to note that instead of writing about memories about her mother directly, the poet takes help of the prop of a photograph to convey to the readers that she is reminiscing about her mother. Reminiscing in itself is a rather abstract nostalgia-influenced act, which the poet has successfully made concrete and empirical by adding to it the specific action of looking at an old photograph of the one she is missing terribly. Isn't it a general human tendency to revisit old pictures in your galleries when we miss a certain person or time of our life? Yes, photographs are beautiful aids of nostalgia because each picture, no matter how candid or well framed, has a story to tell. Charlotte Olsen then shares with us the story behind the picture she is holding in her hands, taking us to the time when her deceased mother had gone to the beach for some paddling as a young girl in the company of her two younger cousin sisters. In the picture, the sisters are each holding her mother's hand, she being the eldest among all at about 12 years of age. It might seem that the poet is just mentioning the mother's age in passing. However, the act of picking out a picture from her mother's childhood is a well thought out one. It helps accentuate the harsh reality of the mother's loss, which is conveyed to us at the end of the poem. By contrasting this loss of life with the playfulness of youth, the poet details how each of the sisters are holding her mother's hand, even in a photograph from her childhood times. The poet's mother had a protective aura about her. This image helps readers feel the motherly presence that the poet perhaps wished to convey so that she can make the loss of the same more pronounced at the end of the poem. Taking all of these significations underlying the photograph into account, the opening sentence of the poem carefully sets the mood and tone for the poem and its overarching subject of losing a mother. Next stanza. All three stood still to smile through their hair at the uncle with the camera. A sweet face, my mother's, that was before I was born, and the sea, which appears to have changed less, washed their terribly transient feet. In the second line, the poet talks in tender details about how the girl's uncle has captured her mother in space and time through a camera, at a point when she had a lot of life ahead of her, waiting to be lived. The camera then becomes an interesting tool of nostalgia, used to always provide food or fond remembrances by means of pictures. Through their hair is an expression used to denote how the three girls are smiling their widest smile. Why? Because they are very happy. They have gone for a sea holiday. A smile so broadly spread across their faces that it seems to reach the strands of hair falling on the sides. She describes her mother's face as one full of sweetness, instantly drawing tender emotions from the readers due to the beautiful way in which the poet likes to think of her mother from the time when she herself hadn't come into her life. Through the words, before I was born, the poet draws a distance between herself and her mother, which, in the second sentence, isn't a painful one. However, this distance takes on a hopeful note once we discover later in the poem that the poet has lost her mother. So the poet here beautifully portrays the contrast between the transience and the permanence. After appreciating the sweetness that defines her mother's youthful face, Shirley shifts her poetic gaze onto the sea and casually remarks on how the endless water body has not changed much over time. Children, the thing that I was pointing out, the contrast between the permanence of nature and the transience of human life. Thus, the sea here symbolizes eternity. See? A part of nature, against the infinite vastness of which human lives appear even more evanescent in comparison. So, permanence and evanescence, children. This evanescence of human lives is touched upon further when the poet mentions how the sea washed the three sisters' terribly transient feet. The words transient feet exemplify the literary device of a transferred epithet, where a noun is meant to take on the attribute of the human. The noun is associated to. Over here, the girls' feet are called transient because it is their own lives that are transient due to the universal reality that every living soul has a shelf life, with its time cut out on earth, a reality that reduces humans to a transient presence in this world. So here, children, please understand the literary device that is used is transferred epithet. The words transient feet. Now, what is transferred epithet? Where a noun is meant to take on the attribute of the human. The noun is associated to. So the girls' feet are called transient because it is their own lives that are transient. that are fleeting due to the universal reality that every living soul has a shelf life with its time cut out on earth, a reality that reduces humans to a transient presence in this world. Now, I can think of a very famous quote of Thomas Carlyle: one life, a little gleam of time between two eternities. Next stanza. She would laugh at the snapshot. See Betty and Dolly, she would say, and look how they dressed us for the beach. The sea holiday was her past. Mine is her laughter. Both ray with the labor days of loss. In this line, the poet remembers fondly how her mother would laugh at probably the hilarious way in which she and her sisters had been dressed for the beach. This seemingly casual laughter has meaning if we look below the surface. When we grow older and are made to become mature and serious over time, we often outgrow the youthful care that could once be felt towards small little things like a visit to the beach, and how even such small events were accompanied with efforts to dress up and look the part. This casual remark of the mother that the poet shares with us emboldens the underlying current of nostalgia over things lost to time that binds the whole poem together. So, the poet, the poet is lost in nostalgia. She is remembering her mother. The mother's smile, the mother's face, the mother's memories. The poet draws the contrast between the two past. This poem flits between. Now, children, what are the poet's two past? What are the poem's two past that has been portrayed here? One of the mothers and one of Shirley's herself. The mother's past was enshrined in the photograph. Remember, I'm telling you, the mother's past. What is that? When she, along with her girl cousin sisters, went for a sea holiday, representing her youthful happy days, while the poet's past comprises a time when she had her mother's laughter that would brighten up the days. It is interesting to note here how both past presented in the poem have laughter and happiness in them, which serves to ratify the theme of loss that is then present in the next sentence, both ray with the labor days of loss. This is indeed a beautiful choice of words. Labor days is an oxymoron that represents the difficulty and struggles one has to go through to arrive at the point where accepting loss and death becomes possible and a part of our daily lives. It is this labored ease that turns even the happiest laughter-filled memories with emotions of pain and loss. And finally, the last stanza. Now she has been dead nearly as many years as that girl lived, and of this circumstance there is nothing to say at all. Its silence silences. The poet finally reveals that the subject of the photograph she is holding, her mother, has been dead for about 12 years, the same age she was when the photograph had been taken. Let me remind you, children, in the photograph, the mother's when the photograph was taken, the mother was about 12 years of age. And now, the same age she was when the photograph had been taken, and the same age, the poet finally reveals that the subject of the photograph she is holding, her mother, has been dead for about 12 years. So see, the age is equal. She has been dead for about 12 years, and coincidentally, the same age she was when the photograph had been taken. This painful universal circumstance of loss to death that all human beings invariably experience in their lives has rendered without words the same poet who was so far being so articulate about the smallest of details in the picture. The poet is speechless. Why? Because the poet lives the life of loss, the loss of her mother. The poet is speechless because once a daughter has lost her mother to death, there is nothing that can be said about a loss so deep, a pain so grave. What this sentence implies is that even the best of poets sometimes fail to give exact expression to such brutal pain because of how deep it goes inside the human psyche. Its presence too all encompassing and profound at the same time to be conveyed in words Hence, the best way the poet can do justice to this pain is by saying that its silence silences, meaning it's a loss that sometimes even fells her poetic pen when she tries to write about it. This is because the dictionary probably does not have words enough to lend proper articulation to such pain. And then, like the poet, one has to take resort in nostalgia and fond memories of the past to soothe their hurting self. When you are sad, children, try to understand. When you are sad, you have lost someone whom you love so deeply. You try to compensate that loss, remembering a very sweet memory with that person. And the silence makes such nostalgia a habit more than an act of remembering, something that the poet earlier hints at through the words labored is. Now, children, let me give you an analysis of this silence, which is very important in this poem. Transitoriness of life. Death, it is a part of life, and on thinking of it, one really has no words to express how one feels. The silence of the whole situation silences the poet and leaves her quiet. The poetic device that has been used here is alliteration and personification. Though I will come to you separately about the poetic devices that have been used in the poem. The situation has been given the human quality of silence, thus, the silence silences. So, silence has been personified here. The silence, which is an abstraction, it is given a human attribute. The camera thus managed to capture a moment in time. It kept the memory of the mother alive. The sea holiday brought a sad smile to the mother's face because she could not relieve it but was glad that she once had. The camera, similarly, thinking of her mother's laughter brought a sad smile to the poet's face because, although that laughter was now gone, she was glad to have once had it in her life. Nature is perennial, while human life is temporary or transient. The poet uses a transferred epithet again, terribly transient feat, as I have explained to you in my previous slide. Transferred epithet in order to make this comparison and highlight the terribly short lived life of her mother. Children, this link is only about the explanation of the poem, the stanza wise explanation of the poem, and the analysis of silence and the transitoriness of life. Thank you for listening. Try to read the poem again and again and understand the poem. Comprehend the meaning of the poem and refer to the explanation as and when you need. Okay? Thank you so much.